LoreWarrior Campaign, 4th Succession War, the Combine Offensive. Why Coordinator Kurita didn't order any other military actions against the Federated Suns is puzzling. He might have been preoccupied by the events on the Commonwealth front. If the attack by the Galadon regiments against the Dragoons were indeed unauthorized, as the Kuritans claimed, Lord Takashi Kurita could have been grappling with a huge discipline problem. Whatever the reason, only an urgent plea by Chancellor Lau of the Capellan Confederation in late December induced Coordinator Kurita to show effort on the Federated Suns front. The Coordinator and his generals felt that the Federated Suns had two weak areas along the border, in the sliver of stars near Terra and the Galtor region. They quickly drew up plans to make strikes into both areas and yet hold back enough troops to defend against a counterattack or to bolster the Commonwealth front. Northwind. The DCMS wanted to take Northwind because it would make a perfect base to launch a series of attacks separating Terra, the Capellan Confederation, and many other star systems from the Federated Suns. The 5th Deneb Light Cavalry RCT garrisoned Northwind, backed by the Team Banzai and Bradley's Bravos. Attacking Northwind were the 36th Lyran Regulars, the 5th Sword of Light, and the Genyosha, a recently formed elite mech unit. The fighting centered on the Cairnor Mountains on the continent of New Lanark. Combine forces landed east and north of the garrison forces at Cromarty, New Lanark's largest city. AWFS forces fought the Combine troops to a standstill in the early stages. Combine officers saw that the fight for Northwind would become a lengthy, costly campaign unless they came up with a dramatic new strategy. Who was responsible for the atrocity isn't known, but all evidence points to the 5th Sword of Light and its commander, General Palmer Conti. During the second week of the offensive, a company of sworders diverted to attack a distant water reservoir used by Cromarty. Once they'd scattered the lake's defenders, each Combine mech walked into the water up to the hips, paused for several minutes, and then walked out. Observers assumed that the Combine warriors were just cooling their machines. The first report of potomane poisoning came the next day. Soon the entire city, including half of the 5th Deneb, was stricken with a deadly disease. Hospitals were overflowing, and bodies had to be burned in the furnaces of the buildings. Treatment and vaccination saved only a few. Northwind's defenders deduced that the Combine mechs bathing in the reservoir hadn't been cooling off but actually contaminating the water reserve. Some observers who had been at the lake later charged that the legs of the mechs had been painted with a paste that contained a strain of this bacteria. When the mechs bathed, the paste dissolved, releasing the bacteria, and the observers were charged. By the time the water from the lake was cut off, 5,000 citizens of Cromarty were dead. More than half of the 5th Deneb soldiers were dead or deathly ill, and only 4 companies of light cavalry, Team Banzai, and Bradley's Bravos were well because their section of the defence lines got its water from a well. Shortly thereafter, the 36th Lyran Regulars attacked. Despite the condition of the defenders, the attack failed miserably, and the 36th withdrew in seeming disarray. The 5th Deneb under the inexperienced Major Collins pursued, only to be ambushed by the 5th Sword of Light. The 5th Deneb cavalry was overrun and scattered. Team Banzai fought to save the 5th Deneb but was blocked by the Genyosha, which inflicted heavy casualties on the mercenaries. Among the casualties was the commander of the regiment, Dr. B. Banzai, who tried to stand up against 3 assault mechs. The remaining members of Team Banzai withdrew into the Cairnor Mountains with as many troops of the 5th Deneb and Bradley's Bravos as they could find. They chose a rough section called the Rock Spires to await the enemy. As the members of Team Banzai prepared for their final battle, the sound of bagpipes filled their communication systems as the Northwind Highlanders, 4 mech regiments of great reputation, switched their allegiance from the Capellan Confederation to the Federated Suns and were finally returning to their homeland after centuries of absence. Team Banzai and the Combine forces stared as the dropships carrying the Highlanders landed, and for a moment the Combine troops hoped the Highlanders were there as allies. As the first Lancers exited, the dropships started shooting at any DCMS mech within range, eliminating any Combine delusion that friends had arrived. Northwind remained in the hands of the Federated Suns, garrisoned now by 4 regiments of seasoned warriors, all eager to prove their worth to their new liege lord. Any hopes of dividing the Federated Sons from the Lyran Commonwealth were gone. Other actions. The 1st and 2nd Amphigean Light Assault Groups were assigned to attack Galtor III and Marduk. Kuritan forces easily defeated both worlds' defenders, a few regiments of militia and some aging mechs with grey-haired pilots. The Draconis Combine officially annexed both worlds in early January, even though extensive guerrilla activity hampered their forces' every move. The 9th Benjamin Regulars attacked Clantandu IV. The Combine forces thought they had little trouble because the defenders had no mechs. However, they soon discovered that when they met the militia regiments of Clantandu, because the planet had been the frequent target of Combine raids, the militia there had become hardened fighters. The AFFS had also beefed up the militia with quality weaponry like sniper artillery pieces, partisan tanks, and Lyran Maxim troop transports. When the overconfident 9th Benjamin Regulars advanced in sloppy formation and full of swagger, they were shocked by the power and determination of the planet's militia. On Breed, the 11th Benjamin Regulars took on the 2nd Robinson Rangers, and though the Rangers outnumbered the Benjamin troops, the Combine forces used surprise and swiftness during the initial clashes to confuse the regiment into making several crucial errors. As of writing, the Rangers were in charge of the wilderness areas of the planet's largest continents, while the Combine forces held the cities. The 3rd and 6th Benjamin Regulars and 20 infantry and tank regiments attacked the 1st Chisholm Raiders, RCT, on Deshla. The outgunned Raiders outmaneuvered the Combine forces on the snowy plains on 3 occasions, and the Raiders' 1st Battalion suffered heavy losses when it ran into 2 assault companies of the 3rd Benjamin Regulars, but both sides otherwise retained most of their original troops. The fight for Deshla has all the looks of a drawn-out campaign. The 12th Deneb Light Cavalry on David was attacked by the 9th Deeran Regulars and Brian's Legion. According to an MIIO report, Warlord Cherenkov enthusiastically lent these offensive units to the Combine. It's uncertain why the Warlord is so willing to commit forces under his command to this offensive, but it is likely that Cherenkov would use this to justify his refusal to aid Theodore Kurita and the legions of Vega on the Steiner front. The early stages of the fight for David were inconclusive. The efforts of Combine forces to pin down the Deneb mechs were thwarted repeatedly by a determined militia and the actions of civilians who aided the AFFS wherever possible. Overview. The fighting between Wolf's Dragoons and the regiments of the Galadon military district dominated the action in the Federated Sons, and even with each regiment missing half of its warriors, with most of their mechs and fighters damaged and with some of their best officers dead, Wolf's Dragoons proved their superiority again. The Dragoons' combination of maneuverability, speed, and firepower allowed them to outfight 5 fresh Combine mech regiments. By mid-January 3029, however, the Dragoons were down to a third of their former strength. Their mechs were in worse condition, and supplies were almost non-existent. Their enemy, though badly hurt, was still dangerous and eager to finish off the Dragoons. As of writing, it remained in doubt whether the Dragoons' valour would be remembered as the labour of their rebirth, or as the death throes of heroes. For almost 4 months after the wedding, the Kurita dragon did little against the Federated Sons. Whether it was because of the Lyran's Operation Gotterdammerung, or because of the fighting between the Dragoons and the regiments from the Galadon district, it didn't matter to Prince Hansa Davion, who used each day to concentrate on dismembering the Capellan Confederation. The prince was still relieved, even after the dragon finally awoke. The DCMS attacks were well planned and stood a good chance of success, but the offence wasn't an easy push to get that deep within the Federated Sons. The arm of the dragon had to fight for what it wanted. The prince's optimism grew with the successful negotiation that returned the Northwind Highlanders to the Federated Sons, as those 4 regiments guaranteed that Prince Davion's door to the Lyran Commonwealth would stay open. The fighting along the Federated Sons' border with the Draconis Combine was just as bitter and costly as everyone had expected, and fate, once again, favoured the bold. No one was bolder than Prince Hansa.